Hi there, and welcome to Educate, Inform, and Challenge. I am Deb James, not Teresa MacLennan. Normally, Teresa is sitting in the chair and leading the conversation with this program, but we've flipped the tables a little bit. I'm going to be doing the interviewing today. I'm the Community Development Manager with the Barrie Shelter, and Teresa, we want to talk about trauma-informed training. Now, this is a training that we provide at the shelter and we provide it to the community. This is actually number 3 in the series, and it could be 4. We're not sure. There's so much great information and content around trauma, recognizing trauma, and how to interact with people and meet women and meet anybody where they're at when it comes to trauma. So we've had some great conversations so far. Maybe I'll just get you to lead off the top, just a very quick recap of some of the things that we've covered, and then we can keep going with the rest of our series.
Thanks, Deb. And I think, folks really are aware of the purpose of our show. And of course, right now we are doing this very specific series on what it means to be trauma informed. And just before we continue on with that great conversation, I do just want to recognize our Indigenous partners and community. And again, we just always thank you for allowing us to share in this space and to have these conversations on these traditional lands. And we know that this territory is home to many Indigenous communities. And so we thank you so much, and we appreciate an opportunity to be allies. So, Deb, we are talking about trauma informed, and I really do encourage and hope that our viewers would go back and watch this series right from the beginning and really follow along each one. They kind of build on the previous one. But we just want to talk about and give a reminder that we're talking about trauma and that we all carry a certain level of trauma that is very individual to all of us. We all have our own experiences. Some of us can react in a really big way to trauma, and some of us not so much, and that's dependent on our resiliency and our coping and how we've learned to deal with difficulties that happen in our life. And we know that there's lots of folks in our community that have not had the teaching, the mentoring, the parenting, the skill development to be able to deal with trauma. And we know that people have experienced incredible depth of multiple traumas and may find themselves in a situation where they are using drugs and alcohol, maybe unhoused, because they really are unable to cope. And we hope that our discussion is building understanding, respect, dignity, and empathy and compassion for all people, with an understanding of the trauma that people can carry. And how do we treat people nicely, treat people with kindness, treat people with that understanding. So that has been kind of the discussion up to now. And I think we're going to dive into talking about when you are interacting with someone and they become triggered, they become heightened, it becomes escalated. We know that what we're facing is based on their trauma and their experiences, but we're going to talk about how do we deflate it? How do we try to continue working with that person? So does that sound like a good place to start, Deb?
Yes, 100%. Let's go down that road for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what I want to say before I start to dive into the de-escalation piece is this. I would never, ever want anyone to hear what I'm saying today as telling you to put yourself in harm's way. It is vitally important that we all assess our risk and our safety in all situations. Don't ever put yourself in a situation that is becoming unsafe. And if you can see that and recognize that, do the things that you need to protect yourself and create safety for yourself. If you are interacting with somebody and they are becoming heightened and it is becoming uncontrollable and you feel that your safety is at risk, it is important for you to get help or to leave that situation safely if you can. You're creating safety for yourself, but you're also creating safety for that other person. And that is important because there are people that maneuver through the world and they are always heightened because that is their life circumstance. They may always seem on edge. They may always seem ready to burst. That doesn't mean that they're going to. It just may mean that that is how they have learned to cope with stressful situations in their lives. And so I always want to preface, be safe. Think about the safety of yourself and others. And if you have an opportunity to de-escalate a situation, great. But never do that if it's going to put yourself or that other person in harm. So let's start to talk about what it means to de-escalate a situation. So let's say I am working in the shelter. I'll use us as an example. And I'm having a conversation with a woman, and she all of a sudden gets very, very upset with me. She starts to yell at me. She starts to swear at me, call me some colorful names. And she says to me, you know what? You're just like my abuser. I, in my conversation with her, have triggered something for her. But I also have an understanding that she carries great trauma in her life. At that moment, I'm going to assess my level of risk and my level of safety. Do I feel unsafe? Do I need to step out of this situation? Or how can I de-escalate the situation so that we can try to come from a place of rebuilding the relationship, and that I might have an opportunity to teach her some skills to be able to cope with that triggering moment, the stress that she is experiencing, right? And so, again, assessed our safety. Now we're going to talk about de-escalating that situation. So some key things that I want you to remember is that when we become heightened, it can take half an hour to an hour or longer for us to come back to our own normal, right? Sometimes when we are talking with people and they get really heightened really, really fast, we want to try to decrease that really, really fast. When in actuality, it takes people quite a bit of time to be able to come back down. That might be the right time to create some space, right? You know what? Why don't you go get a glass of water and let's come back and talk together? You know what? I'm just going to catch my breath and why don't you do the same? And let's come back in a half an hour and continue the conversation. It is amazing what can happen when you give people time to take a breath, to come back down, right? And then they might be able to re-engage in the conversation again, right? We know that all of us can have varying degrees of trauma that are resolved, maybe unresolved, or are in process. So again, let's have that understanding when we're having conversations with people and it becomes very heightened for them, that there is a trauma response that we are seeing in front of us, right? And we all carry trauma, as we have talked about. So it is ourselves, it's our family, our friends, the people we interact with in the community, it's our coworkers as well. So somebody comes to work and they're having a really hard day and they just seem like they're not able to focus and they seem to be really quick and getting heightened really, really fast. Let's remember that the trauma can be surfacing for that person, and how can we approach them with empathy, right? We know that we can all have good days and bad days, and some days things will work out and some days they don't. How are we being resilient to that, right? People who have resiliency and self-reflection are more apt to be able to de-escalate themselves quicker than others. And that's important to remember, right? Also important to understand that we cannot understand the experiences of others, but we certainly can try to understand first as a way of building relationship, right? There's a saying that says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. So how do we have conversations with people when things are getting heightened from a really respectful place, that they actually still feel like we're listening to them and that we want to be there with them to help them through that, right? It's important for us to remember that people who have trauma can be triggered by our responses, our words, our approach, our physicality, and how we're talking to them. If I talk to somebody and I have my arms crossed like this, it sends a completely different message than if my arms are down, my head is tilted, my voice is soft, in how I'm speaking to that person. Those sorts of gestures can bring the situation down and de-escalate the situation, right? Sometimes people can seem to overact to the things that we say. How we deal with that is vitally important, because it's not about us. It is about them and what they're carrying. It is actually not a personal attack about us. It is about them. So trying to remind ourselves about that when things get heightened with somebody, remember, it's not that they don't like us or that it's about us. It is truly about them and what they are carrying, right?
That's really hard to do, not take it personally, because we are human beings, and because, it's just incredibly difficult to not take it personally. But when you really truly understand that they're just having a reaction, and that it's probably nothing to do with you in that moment, it's something else.
It's hard because we get triggered ourselves, as we've talked about, right? Our own trauma gets triggered, right? None of us want to think that somebody maybe doesn't like us, right? We have a saying at the hospital that when we judge other people, it says something about us that's unresolved, not about them, right? So when we pass judgment and shame and, criticize other people and their actions, that speaks to who we are and what is happening for us much more than it speaks about what's happening to that person. So some other just general tips about de-escalating, and then I know we're going to head into a break, right? As we've talked about, can you in that conversation be empathetic and be non-judgmental? Don't judge or be submissive of a person's feelings or experience. It's their own. As we've said, we all determine what is big in our lives and what isn't. It is not for somebody else to be determining that, right? Person's feelings are very, very real. They're genuine. They're true. We all know our own truth, so to speak. Whether or not we think that those feelings are justified, it doesn't matter. It is their own experience and how they are feeling and going through it, right? So we do need to respect those feelings. It's also important to respect personal space. So if I am working with somebody or having a conversation and I think, this could get a bit tense, right? I don't back myself into a corner in terms of where I'm sitting. I want to make sure that I know where my escape route is, right? I want to make sure that I'm not coming into somebody and saying, here, give me a hug. Let me give you a hug. You'll feel better, right? Respect someone's personal space and your own. Think about the safety of the space and how you need to be safe. So you need to be at the exit if needed, right? To just take a step away. And so I think that those are a couple of really good things for people to think about, just about de-escalating situations. And I know we're going to head into a break, and so we'll talk some more about that in just a second.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
With Rogers TV, you can cheer on the home team from the comfort of your living room. We'll head to the rink, the field, the court, or the pitch, so you don't have to. Tune in and cheer on your local amateur athletes on Rogers TV.
Welcome back to Educate, Inform, and Challenge on Rogers TV. I'm Deb James with Teresa MacLennan. Normally, the tables are turned, but I'm asking the questions today, and Teresa is fielding the questions today, really guiding us through a great conversation on trauma and having a trauma-informed lens when we talk to, specifically to our world, women and children escaping violence, but really, I think you could say a lens that can be applied to every single person that we are, meeting with and talking with, engaging with, and trying to understand where they're coming from and how to meet them and having a true, genuine conversation. We left a few minutes ago, we were talking about de-escalating a situation. You're talking to somebody, it's become very heightened, very fast, and you've come up with some, we were chatting about some things that we can be doing to de-escalate, to try and bring that conversation down a little bit.
So we're just going to continue on that same path. And, I really do recognize for our viewers that there's a lot of talking, but we hope that this is going to be an education and that we are really informing folks. And we're also challenging our viewers to think about how we all interact with other people and how maybe we can be compassionate individuals and maybe take on some of these learnings today and incorporate them into our interactions with other people. So we were talking about how do you de-escalate a situation when you are interacting with a traumatized person, because we all carry trauma, as we have talked about, right? So we talked about being empathetic and non-judgmental. We talked about being really mindful of personal space. We also talked about our body language and the importance about how we hold ourselves as threatening or not threatening. The use of our words, our tone of our voice, right? How we hold our body in space is vitally important, right? The words we use are critical. So how can you use words that are not threatening? Words that don't pass judgment or criticism towards the person, right? Some of the words that I use quite often when I am faced with something and I don't know where to go, I can say in a conversation, help me to understand. Help me to understand. And it creates an opportunity for people to be able to share their story and really to build my knowledge and my learning about their experience. And I value a conversation with someone who wants to know more about me or my situation. And so I really tried to do that with other people. I want people to know that I'm in tune with them, that I care about them, that in a conversation with them, I want to learn. And I just want to know more about their situation, right? And so how we use words is important, and just conveying a sense of inquiry. I want to learn. I want to learn more, right? Help me to understand about that happened to you, right? Like, you can hear the words that I'm saying as examples that hopefully can convey to somebody just a really interest in them, but also a respect in them. It is important for us to keep our own emotional brain in check when we're talking to people, right? That we don't take somebody else's story and make it our own. That when somebody is talking about things that have happened to them, that we don't say, oh yeah, well, you know what happened to me? Mm-hmm. When we do that, we are really diminishing that person's experience. We are taking over the conversation, and I get the intention can be seeming like a good place that we could come together and, bond in the sharing of our experiences. And there's a good time and a place for that. But when you're having a conversation with somebody and they're talking to you about some, maybe really difficult time in their life, give them the space and the time as their own to do that. And yes, it can be helpful to say, yes, I've had something similar happen to me, but know when the right time is to do that and when it is not, right? And what we always want to try to avoid is saying, yeah, I understand how that is. We can never understand what somebody else's experience is. We may think, we may have had something that we feel was very similar that we want to share with that person. But again, from that own person's trauma and life experiences, how they interpret that experience is their own and different to ours, right? So we try really hard as social workers and counselors to not ever step in and take over the conversation. And then it becomes about us and actually not about the person that we're speaking with. So keeping our emotional brain in check and our own experiences is very, very important. Focus on, when you're talking to somebody and trying to de-escalate the situation, focus on their feelings, how they interpret those feelings, what it means to them, right? Try saying something like, I can only imagine how scary that must have been for you. How was that for you, right? What words can you use that convey empathy, but that focuses on the feelings of how that person and where they're at and how they feel about the situation, right? And try in the conversation, if it's becoming a bit heightened, to ignore challenging questions. So sometimes we're having a conversation with somebody and their anger rears up, and we know that. And sometimes in anger, people can challenge us with questions like, well, you probably don't think that I'm a good parent, or, things like that, right? That is really not the intent of the person that you're speaking with to cause harm to you or to turn the tables back on you. It comes from a place, again, of trauma and trying to cope with the conversation, trying to cope with the situation that they're in. It is so important for us not to engage in things and for us to be triggered when somebody says something that can be hurtful to us. How do we park it? How do we put a pin in it and place it over here? And again, remind ourselves that the conversation is about that person and what they need from us in terms of support, right? So hard not to be triggered by the things that people might say to us, but keeping our emotional brain in check, putting a pin in those conversations where somebody is throwing challenging questions to us is really, really important. Keep a focus on what it is. And I use these examples to apply to everyday life. Like if you are a service provider and you are or a business owner and somebody comes in and says, I ordered something and it came and it's broken, and they're really angry and upset. You're having a conversation and an interaction with this person. How can you think about some of the tools that we just talked about and how you're going to try and support that person and de-escalate the situation from becoming something bigger? These are skills and things that we should all try to adapt in our life, in every conversation that we have with anybody, family, friends, coworkers, our supervisors, and people in the community, right? It's very, very important. So I want to talk a little bit more about something that is called low and slow, right? When you are talking to somebody and they are getting heightened and you could see, oh my goodness, I'm worried about this, right? We try to adopt low and slow. So when someone's becoming heightened, it is really helpful to change how we are responding to that person, right? It is about us. So low and slow really emphasizes a slowing down of both our body language, our words, our tone of voice, and our quietness when we are speaking to that person. If they become heightened, we become less heightened. We become slower, and I'm using it right now as I'm talking to you, Deb. We slow down our tone of voice. We quiet ourselves. We relax our body in how we're speaking to people. If I am talking with someone and they're becoming heightened and I start to raise my voice and I talk really fastly at them and I start to do things like this or I start to do things like this, what do you think, Deb, is going to happen in that situation?
It's only going to go higher and higher and higher.
It's going to go higher and higher and higher. If they go higher and I'm going higher, we are both in a really tricky situation. We are both very, very high. If somebody is up here, how can I keep my body low? How can I change my tone of voice? How can I speak to them in just a very calm and quiet manner to try and de-escalate the situation? And if I am not in the right place to be able to do that, and I am getting heightened and triggered in that conversation, that is when we come back to that one of the earlier points about taking space. Saying to the person, do you know what? I'm sorry. I just need to grab a quick glass of water. I just need to deal with something, but I really want to carry on this conversation. I'll be back in like 2 minutes. Can I come and find you? Right? And it's okay to say, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm just a little bit overwhelmed right now, and I really value the conversation. I just need 5 minutes. Can we come back together? Right? Because I do really, really want to talk to you. Right? It's okay to be, relatively honest with people about where you're at and just saying, but always preface it. I value the conversation and I really, really want to have this conversation with you. Can I just take a couple of minutes? I just need to catch my breath. I just need to grab a glass of water, right? And it is amazing when you can take a couple of moments, how the situation will de-escalate itself in that time anyway, right? And so be mindful of our body, our words, our tone of voice, right? The things that we're saying can really de-escalate the situation, I've had many people say to me over my lifetime, my voice can become very quiet and people have said it can be calming and soothing. I've had many people tell me that they could fall asleep listening to the sound of my voice. And, I don't want people to fall asleep while I'm talking, but still, it is lovely to kind of hear that maybe there's a calmness that people are feeling, when they're listening to me, right? And I like that in other people too. If I'm feeling really heightened, what I really want is some very kind, soft words to help me. And so think about that in an escalated situation, right? And the very last thing that I want to talk about very quickly, because I know we need to wrap up, is something called name it to tame it. How can you validate the experience of people and what they're saying to you, right? So if somebody is talking to you about their experiences, we want to choose words that will tame the situation, not escalate it, right? So if somebody's talking to me and I say, you know what, you better calm down, that's going to escalate. If I can say, why don't you get some help for yourself? That's going to escalate the situation, right? But if I can say, I can see that you're angry and I really want to help. I'm really sorry that happened to you. I'm really sorry that I'm not helping you, but let's find somebody who can. Those are just examples of naming it to tame. And so we've talked about a lot of information, and I recognize that it's a lot for people to take in, but we are going to have another show and we are going to continue these conversations. So take a breath, everybody in our community. Thank you for being with us again as we talked again about trauma, de-escalating of situations, and just how we can interact and be more respectful humans to other people, right? So we look forward for you to join us with the next show where we talk about trauma. Please join us and we will see you then. Bye-bye.